Okay? If someone is prohibited by a neder to benefit from another and he does not have what to eat, the other person goes to the storekeeper and says, so and so is prohibited by a neder to benefit from me, and I don't know what to do. He gives him and collects from this one. If he had a house to be built, a fence to be erected.
The important thing, by the way, over here is that he can't make the shopkeeper his shaliach. He can't give him the money and say, okay, now extend the credit to him, because that's directly giving him benefit. But what he can do is he can say he can basically hint to the storekeeper that he's good to cover the credit, that he'll pay off the debt. Because remember, paying off debts is okay.
Okay. If he had a house to be built and a fence to be erected or a field to be harvested, the other person goes to the workers and says, so and so is prohibited by a neder benefit from me, and I don't know what to do. You may work for him and collect wages from this one. If they were traveling on the road and he did not have what to eat, he gives food to someone else as a gift, and that one is permitted it. If there was no one else with them, he puts it on a rock or on a fence and says, these are free for whoever wants, and that one takes and eats. But Yossi, however, forbids this. Partners who are prohibited with a neder the benefit of each other are forbidden to enter the yard. But Eliezer ben Yaakov says this one is entering into his own property, and this one is entering into his own property, but both are forbidden to install a mill or an oven there or to raise chickens. If one of them was prohibited by a neder from benefiting from the other, he may not enter the yard. But Eliezer ben Yaakov says he may say to him, I am entering on my own property, and I'm not entering yours. We force the one who made the neder to share his share. Okay.
So, just the point over here that we're going to see this the same pattern in the following Mishnahs, is that the Chachamim say that when you've got a shutfus of a property between two people, and there's one of the owners has it Issa Hana to somebody else, then you can't enter the yard because of the partial ownership. So. So the Chachamim see this as a partial ownership of the entire yard, whereas Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says we're clarifying over here. When a person walks through there, he's walking through the portion that he's entitled to walk through. He's not using the entire yard. He's just walking through the portion that he's entitled to walk through, which is the part that belongs to the other person. And right. It seems to be kind of fluid that he can just claim that he's walking through the part that belongs to him, even if he takes a different path. He doesn't have to say, okay, this is my path, and we're picking out the markers, and now they're actually subdividing the property. They're definitely not subdividing the property. They still should be in the same area. It's just that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is saying that the path that you take shows that at this point that little portion over there is what belongs to you.
Sure.
Okay. And we'll see Mishna base, similar case. So there's some third party guy who's had an argument with Reuven, and Reuven said, you're not allowed to, you may not have any hana from me. And now he wants to go and visit Shimon, and the path to the house goes to the Chatzer. Lo yikanesh lechatzer, sorry, he can't go and visit Shimon. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer yachol hu lomar lo lesoch shel chaverach ani nichnas ve'eni nichnas lesoch shelach. So once again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov comes and says, no, this third party can come and say, he can start walking through the field. And if Reuben says, get off my lawn, then he can say, listen, I'm walking on Shimon's lawn, not your lawn. Okay, so it's the same machlokes over there.
Machlokes, okay.
Okay. Okay. So what's the case? Once again, you've got the two guys who brog is Reuven has said to Shimon, you may not have any hana from me. Now, Reuven also owns a merchatz in the city, but he has rented it out to Levi. Okay, so Levi's running the merchatz, and Shimon wants to ask Shai, can I go to the merchatz? Because it belongs to Reuven, but Levi's running it. Levi's rented it. Excuse me. Okay, so if Reuben has still retained rights in the property, in other words, he can walk in any time, or he's got a chelik of the takings. Like let's say his deal with Levi is that he takes a percentage of the takings. Well, then if Reuben is coming in, then if Shimon comes in, then he's benefiting from Reuben's bathhouse, or he's giving benefit to Reuben, whichever direction it goes. Whereas if what is happening is that Levi is just paying a fixed schirut, he's saying, for the year I'm paying you $10,000, and any profits I make from the bathhouse are mine. So then Reuben's got no shaykhs at this time to the bathhouse, and Shimon's allowed to go. So he makes an hanai, he gets angry with the guy and says, I should never go into your house, and I should never buy your field. Base. Now the guy who owns the field that he swore against has died. Or he sold it to somebody else. So now it's no longer in his possession. The mutar, he only said lebeischa, your house, your field. However, if he gets angry with Reuben and says, I'll never come into this house again, and it's a konam to me, I should never buy it. Then he has specified this particular house or this particular field, and then it becomes prohibited to him forever.
Right. Okay. Right.
Valid. If a person says, I am to you a cherem, hamudar asur, then the person that he's talking to he's the one who has the isur hana. You may not benefit from me. And the vow can go that way. But if he says the other way, if you are a cherem to me, then of course the person who said it is asur to benefit from the other person. Okay, obviously if you can do one in either direction, you can do both directions too. Okay, so now let's say you've got these two people who are prohibited to benefit from each other. Now, what happens about communal property, things that are owned by the city? Because as residents of the city, they have a chalik in these things. Okay, so what does it mean? So we make a distinction between things that are of ole bavel, right? Which means so things that are communal property to everyone who came up from Bavel and reestablished the Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. They're allowed; those things are permitted because it's not a shutfus between anyone. It's common property of all Yisrael. But they asur to have things that belong to that particular city that they're sitting in, that they're living in at least, because all of the residents of the city are considered as partners in the shared property of the city. So therefore, they've got a din like the shutfin who saw hana from each other, as we saw above. Remember, it was just the two guys in the chatzer, and neither could go through the chatzer because they're both asur b'hana. So the same thing goes for the city now, because any communal areas in the city are also have a shutfus between them. Of course, Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov would argue this and say, no, he's just going through the part that's not the property of the one that he's asked to benefit from.
Why are they using Bavel instead of like any city?
Only Bavel because they reestablished the issue in Eretz Yisrael. My commentary here is actually pretty scant, but why don't you take a look in the ArtScroll commentary for a second?
It says during the second temple period, the largest group of pilgrims to the temple came from Bavel, where most Jews lived. To assist the many people who made the journey, wells were dug along the main highways, which were designated as public property of the Jewish people. All Jews were entitled to take water from these wells, and one could not prevent another from doing so. In the following Mishna, more examples of property of the pilgrims about Bavel are given, and it is evident that this is the general term used to describe any public property of the Jewish people. So no individual had the right to restrict access to any other Jew to public facilities. He could not, in the context of Nedarim, be considered an owner of a share of these facilities. That is, he was not empowered to declare a nether that would forbid his share in these facilities to some other person. To do so would be attempting to forbid property which is not his to someone else, an ability beyond someone's jurisdiction. Therefore, both are permitted in something of the pilgrims from the Bavel. That's what it says. Does that help you?
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect. That just
Okay,
shows
good.
that there's a communal property that was dedicated to the people who were coming up from Babel, and therefore there was no issue for these guys who swore, because they don't have a chalik in the things that belong to Ole Babel. It's just that's just communal for all of Israel.
Was Babel considered the largest city next to Yerushalayim at that time?
It was the largest yeshur. Babel, not just the city. Babel was a country.
That's true. That's right. That's right. So, okay. All right. We're on to base.
We are.
Declarations, Korban, I shall not eat of yours. Korban, I shall eat of yours. And I'm not a Korban. What shall I eat of? What shall I not eat of yours? Are not binding. Shavua, I shall not eat of yours. Shavua, if I shall eat of yours, and no Shavua for what I do not eat are binding. This is an instance in which others are more stringent than the Nedarim. What is an instance in which the Nedarim are more stringent than oaths? He said, if he said, Konam, the sukkah that I am constructing, the lulav I am taking, and the tefillah that I am wearing as Nedarim, these declarations are binding as oaths, and they are not binding, for one may not swear and to transgress the commandments. There is a neder within a neder, but there is not an oath within an oath. How? If he said, I am a Nazirite if I eat, and I'm a Nazirite if I eat, and he eats, he is bound by each declaration. Shavua that I shall not eat, Shavua that I shall not eat, and he ate, he's liable for only one. Interminate Nedarim are treated stringently and their interpretation leniently. How? He said, it is to me like salted meat for wine libations. If he vowed of heaven, it is binding. If he vowed of idols, it's not binding. If it is indeterminate, it is binding. And to me, this is like a kara.
No. It is binding. It is binding. Period. Next subject.
Karam, okay. Binding. It is to me like karam. If he meant a karam to the temple, it is binding. But if he meant a karam of kohanim, it is not binding. If it is indeterminate, it is binding. If one said, it is to me like a tithe, if he vowed like the animal tithe, it's binding. If he vowed of the granary, it is not binding. If it is indeterminate, it is binding, and it is to me like teruma. If he vowed concerning
Again, you.
I did. All right. If it is determinate, it is binding. It is to be like truma. If he vowed concerning the withdrawal from the chamber, it is binding. If he vowed concerning the granary, it is not binding. If it is indeterminate, the neder is binding, and these are the words of Rav Meir. Rav Yehuda says, indeterminate truma in Judea, it is forbidden. In the Galil, is permitted, because people in the Galil are not familiar with the withdrawals from the chamber. Indeterminate haramim, in Judah, they are permissible, but in the Galil, they are binding, because the people of Galil are not familiar with haramim of Kohanim.
Okay.
All right.
Kesubos Gimel Zayin.
Close the door for my cats. Oh, my back. Okay. Karim, we're starting with Yud Gimel Yud Aleph.
No. Kesubos is Gimel Zayin.
Okay. What is the compensation of disgrace? All depends upon the status of one who disgraced and the one who was disgraced. As to impairment, we regard her as if she were a slave woman who was to be sold. How much was she worth and how much is she worth? The fine is a uniform with everyone, and every monetary obligation that has a fixed amount set by the Torah is uniform with everyone. Wherever there is a right of sale, there is no fine imposed, and wherever there is a fine imposed, there is no right of sale. A minor is subject to the right of sale, and she is not entitled to a fine, and a maiden is entitled to a fine. He does not pay the fine. And the right of sale does not apply to her. A mature girl is neither subject to the right of sale nor is entitled to a fine. If one declares, I have seduced so-and-so's daughter, he must pay for disgrace and impairment by his own admission, but he does not pay the fine. Likewise, if one declares, I have stolen and I have slaughtered or I have sold, he must pay by the principal by his own admission, but he need not pay the double payments or the fourfold or fivefold payments. If one declares my ox has killed so-and-so and so-and-so's ox, he must pay the due payments by his own admission. If one declares my ox has killed so-and-so's slave, however, he need not pay the fine by his own admission. This is the general rule. Whoever must pay more than he has damaged and need not pay by his own admission. If that's it.
Yeah, you're trying to.
And that Tanis?
Yeah, we're going to start Tanis today.
I thought that was next. Okay.
Let's finish.
Okay.
Let's finish Rosh Hashanah first, and then we'll do Tanis.
Okay. Dalet Chet. For the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, they may not go beyond the Sabbath boundary, nor may they remove a heap of stones or debris from it for it. But nor may they climb a tree, nor may they ride an animal, nor may they swim on the water, nor may they sever whether with an implement that is prohibited under rabbinic law or with an implement that is prohibited by the Torah through a negative commandment. But if one wishes to put water or wine into it, he may do so. One should not prevent the children from blowing the shofar. Rather, one may occupy himself with them until they learn to blow. One who practices does not discharge his obligation, and one who hears the shofar being blown from one who practices does not discharge his obligation. The order of the shofar blast are 3 sets each. The duration of the tekiah is like 3 truas. The duration of the trua is like 3 quavers. If one blew the first tekiah and prolonged the second tekiah for the duration of 2 kios, it counts as only 1. If one recited the blessings and later a shofar became available to him, he should blow tekiah, trua, tekiah 3 times. Just as the Kazan is obligated, so is every individual obligated. Rabbi Gamil says the Kazan discharges the congregation's obligation. Okay.
And one from Tanis.
One from, did you say Tanis, right?
Yeah.
Okay. From when do we mention the powers of rain? Rabbi Eliezer says from the first Yom Tov of the festival. Rabbi Yeshua says from the last Yom Tov of the festival. Rabbi Yeshua said to him, since rain is but a symptom of curse during the festival, why mention it? Rabbi Eliezer replied to him, I too did not say to request rain, but merely to mention. He causes the wind to blow and the rain to fall in its proper season. He responded, if so, one should always mention the powers of rain. Okay. And we have Master Shiny. We have here. We have Gimel Zion. If a tree stands beside, and the tree stands inside but inclines to the outside, or stands outside and inclines to the inside, what faces the wall inward is considered inside, and what faces the wall outward is considered outside. Oil presses whose entrances are inside but the interiors are outside, or the entrances are outside and their interiors are inside, Beis Shammai say all is considered inside, but Beis Hillel said what faces the wall inward is considered inside, what faces the wall outward is considered outside. The chamber is built in the holy part and the opening in the non-holy. Their interior is non-holy, but their roofs are holy. Built in non-holy and opening into holy, their interior is holy, but their roofs are non-holy. Built in the holy and non-holy and opening into the holy and non-holy, their interior and roofs above the holy and toward the holy are holy, and above the non-holy and toward the non-holy are non-holy. If Ma'aseh Sheni was brought into Yerushalayim, became unclean, whether by an avatuma or by a velad atuma, whether inside or outside, Beis Shammai says it must be redeemed and all must be eaten inside, except that which became unclean by an avatuma outside. But Beis Hillel says all must be redeemed and eaten outside, except that which is rendered unclean by a velad atuma inside. Okay. And speaking of this, we had something in our Mishna class today. We're talking about things that distract you from davening, like Shmona Esrei, if your talis would fall or this would happen. So someone came up with things, what if a mosquito bit you? Or what if a bug was crawling on you? And if it's distracting you, you can't focus on it. You want to get it off.
Yes.
So I mentioned, you could get it off, but I mentioned, I said, what if, is a bug like a mosquito or any of those things? Was it considered like a sheriff? Would you become tummy then from that? No, not at all. It's not that kind of thing.
The shratzim are the shratzim that I mentioned in the Torah. Mosquitoes, insects are not shratzim.
Right. Okay.
You've got the Shmona shratzim, which are very specific species. And by the way, the Shmona shratzim is not that they have chumras and they have kulas, because the chumra is that they're tama in much smaller quantities. The kula is that they're not matame b'masa, whereas with carrying, right? Whereas other things, if you carried the carcass of a dead pig, you would become tame. But if you carried the carcass of a dead lizard without touching it, you would not become tame. So it's not. So the Shmona Shatzi, even those are not specifically, it's not like there's a specific. They're more machmir in general. They're more machmir in some aspects and more makil in others.
Right. It also came up about, if your talus falls off completely. So what do you do? So you continue Shemona Esrei.
Okay, the talus falls off during Shemona Esrei. Well, that's a completely unrelated question. But
I know.
But what happens if your talus falls off? That's brought in. So what is the halacha on that? You just learned it, right?
You just what? I'm sorry.
You just learned that halacha, right? You can tell me what's the.
Well, I think you continue
davening.
You continue davening, and afterwards you can pick it up. Otherwise, it's a hefsek, and you have to make a bracha if your whole talus falls off, and you can't do that in the middle of Shemona Esrei. So you put it on afterwards, and then make the bracha. They were saying about some you're davening in Shemona Esrei, and you have to keep adjusting your talus because it's falling, in such a way, which always happens to me because it's too big. I'm always.
Maybe like the talus nowadays they make them with a special non-slip fabric.
Right.
Some of them are very shiny and they slip easily, but if you can buy a talus that's like especially non-slip.
This is about 12 years old, I think. This one, something like that. So I don't know if that's under the.
I don't know. It's not the age. It's like did you specifically buy the non-slip one?
No, I don't remember.
Anyway, Nedarim.
All right, Nedarim. We have Yud Aleph. Baharis half the size of a grist has no other symptoms inside it. Another Baharis half the size of a grist appears and it has 2 hairs. This nega is confirmed because the comment stated if the Baharis preceded the white hair, the afflicted person is tameh. But if the white hair preceded the Baharis, it is tahor. If it is uncertain, the afflicted person is tameh, but Rabbi Yeshua approves of this ruling. Any doubt concerning the Gayim is tahor, except for this last case and the next one. And what is the next case? If someone had a Baharis the size of a grist that the Kohen could find, at the end of the week of confinement, it was the size of a cellar. But it is uncertain whether this is the original nega that spread or a different nega that replaced it. The Kohen removes it, confirmed tameh. The Kohen confirmed the nega because of white hair, which then disappeared. Subsequently, either the white hair reappeared or living skin or expansion appeared. Whether the original white hair had appeared initially after the first week, after the second week, or after the nega had been declared tahor, the status of the nega does not change. The Kohen confirmed the nega because of living skin and then disappeared. Subsequently, either the living skin reappeared or white hair or expansion appeared. Whether the nega was originally confirmed initially after the first week, after the second week, or after it had been declared tahor, the status of the nega does not change. The Kohen confirmed the nega because of expansion and then disappeared, which then disappeared. Subsequently, either the expansion reappeared or the white hair appeared. Whether the original nega was initially confirmed at the end of the first week or at the end of the second week or after it was declared tahor, the status of the nega does not change.
Okay. And finally, Avos.
Okay, Avos. Okay, Gimel Zion. Rav Elazar, leader of the Bartosa, says, give him from his own, for you and your possessions are his. And similarly, David says, for everything is from you, and from your hand we have given it to you. Rabbi Yaakov says, one who was traveling upon the road while studying a Torah lesson and stops to study and exclaims, how beautiful is this tree, or how beautiful is this furrow, Scripture considers as if he bears guilt for his soul. Rabbi Dosta said, Yanani says in the name of Rabbi Meir, anyone who forgets one item of his studies, Scripture considers as if he bears guilt for his soul. As it is stated, only beware for yourself and greatly beware for your soul as you forget the things that your eyes have beheld. I might think even if his studies overwhelmed him, Scripture therefore states, and lest you remove them from your heart and all the days of your life, thus he does not bear guilt for his soul unless he sits and removes them from his heart. From Kanina ben Dosa says, anyone whose fear of a sin precedes his wisdom will endure. And anyone whose wisdom precedes his fear of sin, his wisdom will not endure. He used to say, anyone whose actions exceed his wisdom will endure. And anyone whose wisdom exceeds his actions, his wisdom will not endure.
And
The way I was walking, did I tell you about the two little kittens that we saw, my son-in-law and I? We saw two little kittens going